So I want to tell you a story that happened with me and one of my best friends. A few years ago, my friend was in the car with me and we're talking, and I was just cutting him off and not really letting him speak. And he goes to me, he's like, Ronan, you are the worst listener I have ever met in my life. And when I heard that, right, most people will get hurt. Most people will get offended or upset, like, oh, how could you tell me that? That's such a harsh thing to say. But when I heard that statement from my best friend, I took a second to stop and I asked myself, have I heard something similar about myself in the past? And then I said to myself, you know what? I've heard from other friends that I was a really bad listener and I wasn't listening to what they're saying, and that I steamroll people or I just interrupt them. And I took a second to think, you know what? If one person tells you you're drunk, you don't have to believe them. If you don't feel drunk, you're probably not drunk. But what if 7 people tell you you're drunk? Even if you don't feel drunk, there's probably something to what they're saying. And if you see that you're getting a certain criticism from various different people, and they're all telling you the same thing, you're not a good listener. Why don't you just listen? Why do you keep interrupting? Why do you steamroll people? You should probably take a step back and ask yourself, wait, is it really a coincidence that so many people know me and they see this one trait that they keep pointing out? So when I heard this, it shook me because no one ever told it to me that way. It was a very strong way to say it. Ronan, you're the worst listener I have ever met in my life. But the truth is, that was one of the most important things I have ever been told in my adult life. And it made one of the most positive impacts on me. Because the second he told that to me in such a strong way, number one, I didn't get upset at him. I knew he only meant well. And I took it as a learning experience for me to say, wow, I can actually learn something very important about myself right now. And that's a stepping stone to getting better. Because if we don't even know our flaws, how are we going to fix anything? How are we going to go and get better when we don't know anything about ourselves, right? Most people, they don't really reflect and do introspection and really know themselves at all. So if you don't know yourself, how are you going to fix yourself and get better and strengthen yourself, or, get rid of the things that you shouldn't have in terms of like your personality, your character traits? So I took that as an opportunity to say, wow, I've just learned something very important about myself that maybe I was, turning a blind eye to, or I wasn't really knowing, I didn't know so well. And I said, wow, am I really that bad of a listener? And then I started paying attention to how I deal with people while we're having conversations. And I've realized that I am a bad listener. I was a very bad listener. I used to interrupt people. I used to steamroll people. I used to not even if I wasn't saying anything, not necessarily listen to them. Just wait to say what I wanted to say and always thought I was right. And ever since he told me that, there was really just a shift in a certain degree of self-awareness that all of a sudden I went into every conversation with one thing on the radar. Like, wait, am I going to listen or am I just going to talk? Am I actually going to listen to them? Am I going to continue being a bad listener? And it just became something that was pushed to the forefront of my realization. And then every time I started speaking to people, I just would go into this mode of like, okay, I have to listen. I'm not going to interrupt. I'm not going to steamroll. I'm not going to go and just wait for them to finish so I could talk. Let me take a step back. Let me actually listen to what they're saying. Let me hear their words. Maybe even make them feel heard. And let's see what happens. And I could tell you instantly, after he told me that, it's like, sometimes something happens and like it shakes you up. I got shook up. And I could tell you that it has changed my life for the better on many different levels. Number one, it's ridiculous to think that you can have a good relationship with another human being, whether it's your boss, whether it's your colleagues at work, whether it's your partner at home, whether it's your children, your parents, your friends, whoever it is. How can you have a relationship that's thriving, that's healthy, if you're not even listening to what your friend or whoever it is saying? Like, just think about that for a second. It sounds even ridiculous to say. Like, you're going to have a real relationship with another person when you don't listen to that person. You don't hear what they tell you. They can come to you and tell you whatever they want, whatever's on their heart, whatever they're going through, and you're not even listening. You're just going to interrupt, or you're going to like say your piece and argue with them or whatever it is without listening to them. How far can you get in the depth of a relationship when you're not listening to the other person? And the answer is that your relationships probably will be superficial. And that's sad. It's okay to have a superficial relationship with like your barista that you see every morning in like Starbucks or whatever. But what happens when it's your partner? What happens when it's your husband or your wife or your children or your parents or, like people that you should have a deep relationship with? If you're not listening to what they're saying, how deep can that relationship be? Not very deep at all. And guess what's going to happen? After people see a few times that you don't listen to them, they stop talking. Because people don't like talking to the wall. People don't like saying something and they're not even going to feel heard. Like, why waste my breath on you when I'm going to tell you this whole thing and you're just not even going to listen to me, or you're going to interrupt me? So being a bad listener really erodes our interpersonal relationships. It just creates a barrier between us and people, because what creates that closeness is when we make people feel heard and we actually hear them and understand their perspective, where they're coming from, what's bothering them, what makes them happy, and be there for them. And when we don't listen, we're really being an absent friend, an absent partner, an absent father or mother. And there's only so far that our relationships can get to without being able to listen. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I felt that becoming a better listener, besides bringing an improvement to my relationships, I feel that it has made me grow as a person. And the reason is because when you don't listen, all your focus is on yourself. What are you going to say? How are you going to prove someone wrong? What's your perspective? What's your opinion? And you're always focused on yourself. And a lot of times when we focus on ourselves, we just like end up in this vortex where it's just about us. And we just like become like egocentric and only think about ourselves. And that's not a way to grow. I've realized that when I try to be a better listener, I actually come out of this like shell that I'm in. I come out of my own bubble and I hear the other person. I learn from the other person. I could take advice from someone else and hear their perspective. I could hear criticism. I could hear perspectives that I wasn't hearing before because I wasn't listening to those people. So the more we focus on ourselves in a negative way, because like we're just like so egotistical, we're like listening to ourselves and we don't care about anyone else, and we're not going to give any respect to other people to hear their opinion or to hear what they're saying, we just become self-absorbed. And that's not really a recipe for growth. Usually people who become self-absorbed and don't see anyone else, they don't grow much. The second you come out of that bubble and you see another person, you could focus on that other person. Understand where they're coming from. Just your focus doesn't become so much about you, it becomes about other people. And that can help a person grow. Seeing other people, hearing their opinions, seeing what they need and how to help them, being there for someone else. Those things push us to become better. And I feel that the opening to doing that is listening to the other person. Because if you don't listen to them, it's might as well be that they don't exist, right? So becoming less self-absorbed and being able to listen, coming out of your self-absorption and seeing the other person, helps not only our relationships, but it also helps our growth, becoming better. You don't become better just by becoming more self-absorbed. You become better when you see other people, you help them, you're there for them. You become a better person. So that's lesson number 2. Lesson number 2 is becoming a better listener. And it's not as hard as you think it may be. Becoming a better listener is not like getting into the NBA or something. It starts with just a certain self-awareness before you have a conversation with someone, to stop and say, okay, I'm going to go in without having a need to interrupt, having respect for someone and allowing them to finish their thought, wanting to make this person feel heard, having the respect for others to allow them to feel heard. It's a very important thing. Imagine you have a kid and the kid never feels heard because you always just never listen to what that kid's saying, where they're coming from, what bothers them, what's hurting them, what makes them happy. It's just disrespectful to the person who's speaking. So come in with this agenda to listen, with a goal to become just self-aware of whether or not you're listening. And it just really starts with self-awareness and a willingness to be better. If it becomes important for you to listen, you'll realize that you're going to start realizing whether or not you're listening. And that's really the first step to fixing this issue. Because most people who don't listen, they don't even realize they don't listen because they're just not listening. So they just interrupt, they don't care, they steamroll. So they're not even aware that they're not listening. The first thing you have to do is try to raise an awareness. When you're talking, try to become aware of whether or not you're listening. And just that awareness really helps, because then you're like, wait, I'm not listening. So then you start listening because you want to become a better listener, right? It's something that you want to do. So it starts with a self-awareness. So make believe someone told you you're a bad listener. And then you're like, wait, really? And then just start looking at your conversations and start seeing whether or not you're actually listening or you're not. And if you really want to fix this, because you understand how important it is, it's much easier than you think. For me, I didn't have to read books on listening and this and that. I just had to start becoming more aware and then wanting to listen, because out of respect for the people I'm friends with, out of respect to my children, out of respect to my friends. And that has taken me a long way. And the more I become aware of this, the easier it is to listen to people. And I think that statement that my friend made to me, a lot of people could have got hurt from that, and it could have created a rift. You know, we say hurtful things sometimes and we shut down and we don't get as close to people who've hurt us in the past. But for me, that statement was one of the best things I've ever been told. I'm so happy my friend told me that, because it really opened my eyes. It shook me up to realize that I'm just not being fair to other people who are opening their mouth when I don't listen to them. And I'm not being fair to myself to be self-absorbed instead of seeing the other person and growing as a person by stepping up to the plate, to becoming a better father, to becoming a better friend or a better son. And that really has changed me for the better. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe so I can share the other lessons with you in the future. And if you don't subscribe, this will probably be the last time we ever see each other. So I wish you a successful life. I think life would be a little bit better with me in it, because this channel is all about growth and getting to the next level. So if you did enjoy it, give this video a subscribe and a like, and I will see you at the next lesson.